Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Making Automation Smarter at Enterprise Scale, Advancing Observability and Analytics for Better Automation Outcomes. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be moderating today's event. Our featured speakers are Dan Twing, President and COO from Enterprise Management Associates, and Jon Hiett, Global Solution Architect at Broadcom. Dan joined EMA in 2005 and has over 25 years of experience in information systems, software development, and technology outsourcing. Dan focuses on all aspects of intelligent and automated management of IT. Jon is a world-class solution architect with decades of automation experience across multiple industries. In his role, Jon works with organizations to help define and implement strategies for their execution, management, and observability of automation. While Dan and Jon will defer answering your questions until the conclusion of today's event, we encourage you to log your questions anytime by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA later today that will include the on-demand playback as well as additional resources from today's event. So I encourage you to check that email out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our first featured speaker, Dan Twing. Dan?
Thanks, Raleigh. Well, welcome everybody. One of the biggest misconceptions recently is that, we struggle with automation. As we're facing a lot of change, what we should remind ourselves that, automation is not really the problem. We have a lot of stuff that works quite well. We rely on automation with, across many different environments. It works and continues to expand. In my research, more than 3/4 of organizations rate their automation as effective across workflows. That includes everything from mainframe scheduling to cloud orchestration to DevOps. So, automation itself isn't failing, but the real challenge here is that enterprises are facing today with automation is just the increasing complexity, and it's been dramatically getting more complex. And so that complexity is really what we are struggling with, in my opinion. And it is the real enemy, right? We now span, operations, data pipelines, cloud platforms. We have lots of different business processes, and these processes don't begin and end on the same environment often. So we end up to see end to end, it gets very messy because it doesn't necessarily stay in the same automation environment. In fact, we're seeing more fragmentation than as we bring agentic AI forward, it's going to fragment even more. So how we collect all of that understanding now becomes more complex across other environments. And this is where the traditional workload automation analytics and, for predictive analytics and things needs to expand its awareness of these processes across many different platforms. So automation visibility kind of stops a little bit today. It's strong within individual platforms where we can see job status, local dependencies. We look at the execution history. But it breaks down if we stay in one tool and yet the process is crossing multiple tools. So, that leaves us where we can't really see that end-to-end view. And this is where we need to step up our game. Now, there's been product around for a while in many products, and AAI that we're going to be talking about here today is one of those. Traditional observability was built to monitor infrastructure and apps. It serves networks, databases, application performance, but we really haven't thought about automation observability. We have had these analytics tools, but many of them, and Jon's going to be talking a bit later here about how that connects going forward, because we really have to step up this game from more of a what happened historical record or monitoring what's running late. We now have to start advising agentic AI on how to potentially alter the orchestration and the flow, get to the outcome correctly. That's going to change the game a bit. That's where automation observability really comes in. It adds visibility into automation workflows themselves. And AI has been doing this for a while, but this is the moment where we really have to step up that game. And Jon, certainly certainly have some experience there. As we go from monitoring to observability, what really needs to change? We have to go from isolated metrics to more coordinated signals across all platforms. And AI has been doing this for a while, but again, with agentic AI, it becomes even more important. Also, we'd like to go from static alerts to more dynamic content, reacting to isolated failures, understanding business impact risk. We have to really understand more as automation has fragmented. So observability platforms really need to transform automation data into operational understanding. And Jon, certainly you've lived that arc as we went through a lot of change in the last 10 years, and now you're preparing for what agentic AI is going to mean. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how this shows up in conversations with clients or your own experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dan. I mean, I previously was one of those people that would receive a signal for a failure. Often, I'd have no clue of the business impact if it went unaddressed. In fact, on some occasions, I'd receive a second signal while working on the first. If I'd been able to understand each signal's business impact, it would have helped me to prioritize the order in which I worked on them. If both were critical, for example, I might have decided to escalate or to bring in additional resources to help. The observability or the signaling types that we have added gives you that chance to get ahead of the game. On the topic of static alerting that you mentioned, Dan, this was probably one of the most frustrating things I used to experience. Interrupted sleep for a static object-related runtime alert. Often the task had completed by the time I'd logged in, but with no business context, no view of what might be impacted up or downstream, I'd go back to bed oblivious to the business impact it might have had. Thanks for asking, Dan.
Yeah. So, as we move forward, there's an opportunity here to increase that understanding. And with agentic AI, that's really going to have to happen with more granularity, and yet it has to communicate understanding quickly to folks on the front line. So, automation analytics platforms provide this enterprise-wide analytics layer, and AI has been doing that across multiple workload platforms. Jon's going to tell us a bit later about how they're extending that to even some other types of systems that weren't traditionally workload automation class of software, because as automation fragments, we need to bring in those other signals. So they're already starting to add this broader view, but we really need to think about how do we help teams distinguish symptoms from root causes. Analytics surface downstream impact and risk before it happens, but now we're going to be letting the orchestration even be a bit flexible. It won't be the serialized job steps that we're familiar with. Some of those will still exist, but as we get more AI in the mix, things will get even more flexible, which is good. But without this trying to take the information to a level of understanding that helps, as you're working the problem, understand the downstream business impact, or helps folks downstream communicate correctly as they try to help others work a problem, if we have such problem. So it really means we can intervene faster, we can escalate better. The proper analytics turn observability into actionable insight. And this is Jon's point about, don't just tell me this failed or is running late, and then when I get there, yeah, it finished, even if it finished late. But if you don't tell me the downstream impact of that, an experienced person who's fully cognizant after being woke up in the middle of the night can certainly know they have to look wider, but not everyone has the same level of experience. And in those moments, we can do better to help folks understand the broader impact, having more dynamic messages that bring more understanding. And then we have to even move further from understanding to informed action. The challenge really becomes about evolving these systems so that we can understand, as orchestration becomes more distributed and the handoffs between different actors on an overall business outcome across several different automation platforms, we still need that end-to-end view. And really, as it becomes more autonomous and more distributed, without that centralized view, it's going to be very hard to govern this correctly, even in our traditional types of workloads, and even more as we get the agentic probability of how things might get resolved, or outcome processes may even not be in the order that we're traditionally familiar with. If we task the AI to say, get me to the outcome, it may have creative ways to get there in the moment that might actually alter workflows, if that's allowed. If it's not allowed, we need to have the guardrails to not allow that. But all of that governance comes through seeing the process end to end. That's why automation analytics is becoming more strategic layer in modern automation architecture. It's always been important, but its importance is rising at this moment. And analytics are not a future capability. I mean, they already deliver real value today. We see enterprise automation environments that have highly complex use of analytics. Some organizations, research I did 5 or 6 years ago, put that at about 12 to 14%, were running multiple schedulers where it became difficult to see end to end. About 30% were running multiple schedulers, but about 14 or 15% said they had real impact because they could not see end to end. And that number, I haven't tested it in a few years, it's probably grown. So when something breaks in an environment like that, it rarely breaks in isolation. You know, failures usually happen around the boundary edges, right, of any process. And as it moves between steps, things can break down. That's why analytics and root cause analysis have become important, because it's hard to discern that. And we've certainly done a good job of getting there. We connect observability. Analytics become far more powerful when they operate across platforms. And certainly AI was one of the first to be doing this. And as orchestration environments evolve with the AI capabilities layered on top, this kind of analytics foundation is going to be even more important to piece all of that back together. With that, I'm going to see what Jon has to tell us about this at a more product layer, and the actual way this has been used in how they're upgrading this for where we're heading next.
Thanks, Dan. That's a really great introduction. And this is a subject that I find really interesting. I've spent a long time working in the financial sector, and more recently for Broadcom. It's a subject that's really close to my heart. But let's take a step back and have a look at the foundational issue we're having to deal with. We're all using lots of technologies to automate different parts of our estate. These could be running on the mainframe, distributed and in the cloud, as Dan said. We may have a history of on-premise automation with a commercial solution and now have a data practice using Airflow. Or perhaps it could be as simple as natural growth within the same automation toolset. We're using different technology because that's what we chose as our best of breed for the solutions that they automate. But our business processes don't respect that demarcation. They cross the boundaries. The challenge is bringing everything together and then gaining some consistency over the raw data each of these systems generate. They all do a little bit, but none of them are specialists in analytics. So we create air gaps in our monitoring of business processes. We used to talk about islands of automation. We've built the API calls and we've built the file semaphores or the bridges to join them. For execution, we're covered. But what happens when something goes wrong? We don't see it. We can't determine when issues will impact the business. It really doesn't matter if you call this automation or scheduling. The domain's the same, and so is its purpose. It's all about running the business. In this fragmented world, there are a number of challenges we have to face. Your team or teams must be experts in multiple interfaces and with multiple tool sets just to track one business process. Each automation tool retains historical data for different periods of time. This makes long-term trend analysis extremely difficult to achieve. While users can determine if a job has failed in one automation tool, they can't easily see if this failure was due to a prerequisite failing in another. These tools will show you jobs and they'll show you workflows, but they don't show or easily map to business processes. And lastly, they're all reactive. By the time a signal is generated, an issue's already occurred. Next slide, please, Dan. Thank you. To solve these challenges, we need to bring this all together and provide the business with an intelligent control plane, observability and analytics that are both platform and automation tool agnostic, provided within a single pane of glass. Broadcom's Automation Analytics and Intelligence, or AAI, provides exactly this. AAI is built to deliver the visibility that's required to operate automation at scale. Automation performs tasks. Tasks start, they run, and the desired outcome's success. Simple, right? If only there was some global standard for automation. For example, one tool's success might be another's end okay. Some tools provide one failure state, others have multiple states. For example, failure, ended not okay, or error abend. Normalizing this data is vital to understanding performance and to correlation across the systems. We're now able to compare apples to apples instead of apples to pears, or in some cases, apples to potatoes. Let me tell you about a request I received from a financial services customer. A managing director in ITOps was facing a challenge. His team are responsible for the provision and maintenance of multiple automation tools. The senior staff member wanted to move conversations with the business away from automation tooling centricity. He wanted his offering to become more of a scheduling as a service offering. He wanted his team to offer the best automation solution for the business use case. And key to that was the control plane. We spent some time building dashboards and for some of the business teams and for his ITOps team. Not too dissimilar to this one. This allowed his business teams the option of using multiple tools without sacrificing efficiency and operational excellence. So what happens when we move from managing a fragmented, disconnected automation landscape to a platform that breaks down those barriers? By implementing a platform and tool-agnostic control plane, we move away from managing individual tasks in isolated engines, and we start managing business processes from end to end. This transforms the operational dynamic in 4 key ways. Instead of reacting to failures, we use predictive analytics and proactive signaling to identify and inform of automation issues before business impact. It's about moving from a fixing mentality to a preventing one. Automation doesn't exist in a vacuum, as Dan's already said. If a file fails to arrive from the mainframe or a data ingestion task fails, what does that mean? Is the CFO report in jeopardy? Will the business be able to trade in tomorrow's stock market? A unified view allows impact to be understood, mapping technical dependencies to business outcomes. When something does go wrong, we shouldn't have to hunt through multiple views and multiple tools to understand where. A cross-platform, cross-engine view allows the issue to be traced back to its source easily, regardless of where it lives. Once clear observability is obtained, we can use it to find efficiencies, reducing runtimes, driving value, and eliminating resource waste. Let's think about this. We live in a world where automation is the lifeblood of the business. I know from experience, and more overnight on RCA calls than I care to remember, that automation is often blamed when things go wrong. Our outreach is tremendous, with hundreds, if not thousands, of endpoints. It stands to reason, then, that often the first indication of a wider IT-related issue is when automation stumbles. My point is this: automation gets noticed when something goes wrong. whether it's our fault or not. Having full visibility across your automation gives you the power back. It will help you to understand and perhaps more importantly, be able to prove where you've had a successful impact on the business as well. Thanks, Dan.
Well, yes, and John, that gives us some great, very specific insight onto some of the ways that you all have been stitching this story together as we've gone through the last 10 or 12 years and watched automation become, more important and yet more scattered at the same time. Decisions were always part of orchestration, right? I mean, we started maybe with some time-based triggers. We've been for years now. We've had event triggers. We've had dependency rules, thresholds. There's escalation logic that's been part of workload automation. So we've been making the orchestration that we had smarter, a bit more flexible, but all still very deterministic. And automation platforms have long made sort of conditional decisions, but they were all very deterministic. Analytics extended that, by helping us explain failures, identify likely root causes, and so on. Suggestions there are simply human in the loop decisions. I mean, we've even had moments before we used that term where we said, here's some knowledge about what's happened. Now you need to help make the next choice in the process. If it fail, try three times, retry on a file transfer, then kick an alert kind of thing. Very basic, but we've had these capabilities. What's happening next, though, is really interesting, because this is where, as we bring agentic forward and as automation fragments more, we really have to be able to extend what we're aware of in these systems at a more granular level, because we now may have different pathways to get to the same outcome. We certainly will have more of the why was this choice made along the way that we have to log, and that we have to be able to be aware of from an observability standpoint, because we're adding a lot more decision points, or we will be, as we bring agentic forward. And so that control loop has to be sustained. Orchestration flow is still pretty constant. There's signal, there's context, we make a decision, we take an action, and that happens over and over. But the very deterministic ways that we built that into job streams traditionally is about to get radically changed, and that's going to radically change what we have to observe and be aware of in order to understand what's happening. John's going to show us next how some of that plays out over time in the product, how we've arrived where we are and where we might be going.
Thanks very much, Dan. This truly is an evolution. Dan's mentioned analytics and how that's evolving. And really, we see this as evolving from analytics to business intelligence. And this is a journey. AI was the first tool in the marketplace to bring advanced analytics for automation, beginning in the noughties with proprietary algorithms and early machine learning to initially introduce analytics and monitoring for CA Technologies' Autosys platform. Mainframe automation support in the form of CA7 soon came afterwards. Dedicated analytics arrived a little later on, with capabilities to transform the rich automation data into reports and data points for some early observability gains. As the technology stack transformed and customer interest grew, support was added for automation technologies beyond those owned by CA. Support for Tidal, Control M, and IWS came next. The next milestone was the introduction of the REST API, which has evolved significantly. Now public, it's able to be consumed openly and used today for all ingress into the solution. The API is a key part of the automation integrations that followed for atomic automation, ESP, and most recently Apache Airflow and its packaged variants, such as Google Cloud Composer and Amazon Managed Workflows for Apache Airflow, or MWAA. analytics is undergoing a transformation. Business impact intelligence, enhancements in the SLA management capabilities, simulation, optimization, and the recent introduction of AI have led to where we are today. As I've said, this is an evolution from automation analytics to true business intelligence. And we're not done. Change is constant. AI's analytics journey has been an exciting one, but it's building on its already solid foundations. Earlier, Dan talked about the increase in automation complexity. This makes the understanding of automation performance within the business vital to its success. How can you manage and improve what you can't measure? Even if we have these measurements, they have to be presented in a way that's easy for everyone to consume. Last year, AI saw the introduction of a business-level dashboard. This represents another step in the evolution and also our focus on elevating automation data to the business owners, helping them facilitate business decision-making. With business units, departments, or service groups organized in a way that makes sense to your enterprise, this high-level performance heat map provides a means of identifying the areas or the months of low service delivery attainment. It can be used to very quickly identify the specific applications or processes that are causing problems. From the dashboard, you can easily access the detail of the problematic process and furthermore, use the optimization tool to help understand how application performance can be improved. With this view, business leaders obtain a sense of how their critical business processes are performing and how they're trending. Let's walk through what this looks like. Let's all imagine for a second that we hold joint responsibility for the attainment of the business goals and objectives within the EMEA region. We need to understand how our business is performing. We start by analysing the data at the system level, drilling into the grouping of regions so that we can see how our business unit's performing. As we can see here, after some bumps in service delivery during 2025, our region's business performance has been improving, reaching levels above 70% attainment rate. However, last month, in February of 26, performance dipped. So we need to understand why. When we move our focus to the business processes that form our EMEA unit, it becomes evident that, generally speaking, the performance of most services is satisfactory. There is, however, one service that's having a detrimental impact on the region, dragging the attainment figure down month after month. Let's take a look at this in more detail. Now we understand what happened. The margins are slight. They're margins nonetheless. In some enterprises, delivering a service or missing a deadline by just 1 second can result in a significant impact. In a matter of seconds, we've determined how our unit's performing. We've been able to compare its performance with others and gain an understanding of the cause. The view of performance has transitioned from one of the enterprise through the business units to land on a service that's poorly performing. Dan, how does this view of the business performance and analytics align with the discussions you're having today?
Directly. I mean, this is there's so much to oversee, and what you just showed is a very narrowing funnel that leads you to the problem. And that, in your example and in real life, that can cross platforms, that can cross different automation environments where without bringing that picture in across 3 or 4 different tools, you don't really get that full end-to-end view. This is a problem many live with. I mentioned earlier, for about 12% the last time I tested, they were still struggling. What I failed to mention earlier is for 20% of the about 35% that have had multiple systems and real issues from it, they made the issues go away with tools just like this. And as you said, predominantly, you all were out first with that, but there are other answers. And without this sort of a view, you can't get to that resolution as quickly. So no, this is exactly what is needed. And more importantly, that's looking backwards at what we had is complexity. As we look forward with agentic AI, this capability is going to become even more important.
Thanks very much, Dan. We're not done there though. We've seen that we have a unified view of the process, but we can actually get to and focus on the data that sits behind it. One row of the performance heat map that we saw a second ago has now become a deep dive into the automation analytics, providing an entire understanding of what the service performance has looked like over time. We can also view what that service delivery performance will look like into the future. Now that we have that detailed view of performance and each of its executions with visuals that are personally agnostic that are persona agnostic, Red is bad, green is good, easily understood by whomever might look at it. We can understand trendings, we can view generated signals and many more details. But what we really need to know now is we need to understand the cause of the service delivery failures in front of us. Focusing on one of those executions that failed to meet its deadline, it becomes clear that the critical path indicated here with red arrows was impacted by a failure early in the process. The task was rerun successfully, but the delay that caused this prevented the service from being delivered on time. The view of the timeline means you can easily identify that the first execution of the task, had it been successful, would have resulted in the service being delivered way before the deadline. Now we understand what caused the problem. We can compare this execution with historical data and with future forecasts to further enhance our understanding and help guide us toward a long-term solution. Perhaps this failing task is a regular cause of delays. Using the data available, we can identify this. Analysing and resolving the failure of this single job might increase the chance of successful delivery and have a major impact on the overall business performance. With our roleplay concluded, our dive into analytics has not.
Sorry about that, John. I bumped the mouse there, but you finished strong. Here's your next slide.
Thank you very much, Dan. Thanks a lot. So far, we've looked at how the foundational analytics of AI have been enhanced and how AI can elevate understanding of issues. But the power doesn't stop there. Automation data has been gathered by AI for years. It's rich, it's full of detail. And as we continue to build on this, we're constantly finding new, valuable ways to present this back to the business. Visualization provides a means to identify optimization opportunities. With an automatically created, dynamic view of the jobs required for successful service delivery, analytics can provide indications of delays. Perhaps a process has a design bottleneck, such as an embedded start time. These delays are presented in AI as data. Furthermore, they can be visually identified as execution gaps, periods of time that jobs or tasks could, but do not run. With that detail, changes can be made to eliminate those gaps and enhance service performance. In addition, optimization recommendations can be obtained. AI will analyze each job and its execution within the service and rank them in order of those that are most likely to cause a delay. This provides the business with a means of proactively identifying and addressing service creepage before issues occur. It also provides the capability to enhance those services that are already running well. So what are the latest developments in AI analytics? It's a journey, as I said, it's an evolution. Well, we're building on its strong foundations. That evolution is picking up pace with the introduction of AI. Today, AI within the tool is focused on improving the user experience, providing instant, seamless, and in-tool access to information via a chatbot, making the software easy for everyone to use. Applying data filters doesn't require traversal of lists and selecting of checkboxes of the past. Neither does it require knowledge of database schemas, SQL, or any specific automation expertise. The AI filter assistant will take care of filters for you. Simply ask for the data that you need. Another great leap forward is coming. Those that choose to can benefit from the introduction of an AI solution that breaks down static reporting barriers, no longer ring-fencing data insights to those packaged in the product. Instead, use generative AI to build flexible, demand-based reports using natural language. AI will leverage LLM technology, an open search repository, and MCP server to provide this. Simply ask for the automation data you require to generate customizable, deterministic insights that can be shared, they can be scheduled, and published to dashboards. AI's future is exciting, and I'm certain that AI will play a significant part in what's yet to come. Let's all remember, though, that while this AI evolution continues, the importance of service delivery must not and cannot be forgotten or overlooked. After all, it's what ultimately leads to the business's success.
Oh, that's so true, John. A lot of these conversations, I have to step back and go, there's a lot of cool things coming, but all of it exists for one reason. Assure the outcome happens, assure the business can function. And all of these new bells and whistles, if they're not helpful to that, maybe they shouldn't be integrated, right? And as they're integrated, you can't lose sight of that end goal. And really, as we look at how orchestration evolves, one thing becomes very clear: observability is not optional. I mean, if we're going to allow more dynamicism in how we arrive at a workload, and we integrate things that are going to be making choices along the way for us, we have to understand what's happening, and we have to bring that state of awareness of the infrastructure, the applications, which are going to become, lots of little agent meshes that help deliver these capabilities. We have to understand what's happening and provide those decision points with enough state information to make good choices and to log what we need to understand when it doesn't come out correctly. So over time, we've always been observing, but now we need better quality signals. We have to increase the breadth even further to coordinate across more systems. The confidence of recommendations and the speed that we can make decisions is going to depend on that. So AI is going to help enhance what we've already been doing, and this is going to enable us to orchestrate even smarter as we go forward. So, we've had this foundation for 15 years, and John's timeline gave us a great view of how AI has evolved. Enterprise automation has required more intelligence to operate at scale, long before we've seen observability rising up in the last few years. I mean, we called it predictive analytics back then. John correctly points out that we're moving from more of just understanding the historical record or the rapidly evolving delays that might cause problems to really having true intelligence about what's happening. And that moves beyond prediction of execution outcomes or early identification and root cause analysis. Those things have all been well supported, but they're going to get even more important as we make these shifts. John, you highlighted that, but before we wrap up here, are there any other thoughts that you want to add to kind of this transition we're at? I mean, you guys have just gone through a lot of work to be ready for what's coming, to improve what you have. But as you said, the journey's really started.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. I agree. I agree with what you said there. As our technology stack evolves and AI becomes even more embedded in what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, that observability, that ability to tie things together and get ahead of what's happening is going to only increase in importance. And I think with the evolution to business intelligence from analytics, we'll be able to make those better decisions. It's all very well knowing that we need to jump, but how soon do we need to jump? And of course, how high do we need to jump? They're all decisions that we need to make, and I hope you don't mind the way I've wrapped that up, but that's what we're ultimately leading toward, a better way of making decisions and the right, correct decisions to ensure that our business outcomes are successfully delivered.
Well, and that leads us directly to my final point, which is, smarter automation requires better insight. I mean, that's just, I think of it as state awareness, right? You have to know the environment, you have to know where you're at, what all is going on, and you have to see end to end. So as orchestration environments grow more dynamic, the cost of poor visibility is going to go up. Doing this well is how we manage the risk that everyone is so worried about with bringing forth AI into all of these different business processes. It's really no different than any technology we've absorbed in this class of automation software over the last 50 years. It's just going to happen and feel a lot faster, but we've absorbed these things before in automation, and you can see the work that Jon and the folks at Broadcom are doing to make us all ready to be able to absorb that. But we really need to take a pause and reassess, how do you observe automation execution across platforms? How do you correlate dependencies and downstream impact? How do you use analytics to support that human decision-making process? Regardless of what automation environment you have, you're going to need better visibility than we've historically had, even though if you were already using AAA, you had pretty good visibility. But they're making the product better and the need is going up. With that, let's move to Q&A and see what folks think about this message and what they're dealing with in all of this change.
Thanks, Dan. Before I dive into questions, I wanted to point out these additional resources from Broadcom. Check those out, and I will also include these links in the follow-up email. So let's jump into the questions. First, starting with you, Jon, how can this help me with my Airflow data pipelines?
Oh, thanks, Freddie. That's a great question. So Airflow does not have visibility of anything outside the Airflow stack, so to speak. AI provides that cross-platform context. A lot of Airflow data or data pipelines, for example, that run in Airflow have dependencies outside of Airflow. A lot do on incoming data, and they're passing that data off to additional processes. In addition to that, we speak to customers that are running multiple versions or multiple instances of Airflow. Each Airflow instance is pretty much centric to itself. If you have those dependencies that expand across systems, then you'll need that unified observability layer to view those dependencies across them. But also, even if you're not using multiple systems or multiple Airflow instances, maybe you have external sensor tasks that are used to monitor inter-DAG dependencies between tasks. Again, in Airflow, you can see that there's an external dependency, and you can understand that there is an external dependency in another DAG. What you don't obtain from Airflow directly is the end-to-end view of the timeline of the process that transcends through that sensor task into the previous DAG or previous DAGs in the business process. Airflow, of course, will provide you with insight into what's happening in your Airflow instance now. But unlike AI, where you can get an impression and an indication given from the historical data of how your Airflow DAGs and tasks will be running in the future. So to wrap up, AI gives an observability layer across one or multiple Airflows or a mixture of different Airflow environments. And for your data pipelines, you can then have that single pane of glass that can help you to ensure that your data delivery is successful and that your Airflow processing is successful. Thanks, Riley, and thanks for the question.
That's great. Thanks, Jon. Dan, jumping over to you. Automation is becoming more distributed across applications, cloud services, and AI-driven processes. Does this shift make observability of automation behavior more strategically important than the automation engines themselves? What are you seeing?
A month ago, I'm not sure I would say yes to that, but in the last, even in just the last 2 weeks, that's starting to emerge for me as, yeah, the answer I'd have to say is yes. As automation fragments, each individual platform, it's not really less important. They're all important, but the more gaps that exist, the more handoffs that a process has to go through from different environments and different automation tools. The actual observability or visibility of what's happening, I think, will become more important than each individual tool, because Jon gave us several examples of how that breaks down, and it's in those moments between systems and between different applications. And with that rising complexity, yeah, I actually think that we're going to see that this class of tools certainly will be every bit as important as any of those different automation environments. But if you don't have that end-to-end view, all of the others will struggle, and you'll struggle to run them.
Thanks, Dan. Jon, jumping back over to you, how can this help me share information with my business owners?
Oh, another great question. Well, we've seen in today's presentation the business service or the business performance dashboard, and we walked through how that dashboard can be used to get to the granular detail. The business doesn't, or the business owners don't really care if job 42 failed. What they do care about is whether they're going to meet their objectives for the monthly financial close or for customer onboarding, for example. When you have those business-centric dashboards, at a glance, the business owners and the business can understand how their processes and how their deliverables are being achieved. Importantly as well, with the ability to generate those data insights into your automation environment and understand how your automation environment is performing, reports can be automatically scheduled, automatically executed, and automatically delivered to recipients without the need to visit the application or the UI in any way, shape, or form. So you can facilitate the delivery of that critical business delivery report on a Monday morning directly to the business owner's mailbox when he arrives in the office. Because AI predicts delays or issues before they happen, then the business will benefit from having that predictive capability. They might have the chance to resolve a potential issue before there's an impact. So I think that pretty neatly sums up how AI can share that information, really. Thank you for the question again.
Sure. This one I'll throw out to both of you if you have insights to share. Do you have any insights on reduction in ticket volume or reduction in MTTR?
I can say that I've seen in my research that when I ask that question, and we don't get to specific numbers at that level, but absolutely you see improvements. When I've asked questions, give me ranges and so forth, there's an absolute reduction. Jon, you may have some very specific customer examples that you can respond to that with.
I actually have a personal example, Dan. So earlier on, I spoke about static alerts and waking in the morning because a static runtime alert had been generated. I think what we're seeing customers, or what the AI platform and the control plane allows you to do, is move away from some of that object level monitoring to more of a process level monitoring solution. So in days of old, you might have 4 tasks that each have a runtime alert of 10 minutes, as a very simplistic example. They're static. So task 1, 2, 3, and 4 have no idea of what's gone on before and what's about to go on after they run. So they don't understand that if task 1 runs for 5 minutes, that 10-minute threshold on task 2 it's not really needed as far as the process goes, because task 1 has finished sooner than expected. So what we're seeing customers do is gradually shift away from those object-centric alerts in their critical business processes and move to more of a holistic process-based alerting system, because they're going to get the predictive alert. They're going to get an alert from the automation tool if the job fails, and from AI if that impacts the job stream or the business process. So I think you can drive down tickets using the intelligent control plane in such a way as that. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Jon. Let's take one final question. What is the benefit of having longer term data?
Well, I'll give my opinion on this, and then I'll throw to Dan and see if Dan wants to add anything in. Without the longer term data, as I've said in the presentation, it's really hard to draw trending and to understand how historical performance is going to impact performance in the future. How would you know that a job or a task in the scheduler that ran last quarter, ran longer, is going to potentially run longer this quarter? When we're talking about the historical data, there are a lot of regulated industries. You need to have that historical data. What ran? Where did it run? What did it run? And you need to be able to prove that to the auditors. You need to be able to actually meet your compliance objectives. I think also the long-term data allows the system to build and enhance what it can offer. It's great to have that visibility of historical performance, be able to understand those trends, and be able to map them to the future executions. Dan, I'm sure you have a perspective on that one as well.
Well, certainly. First of all, to take a step back, I mean, if you're at all familiar with some business processes that use business intelligence that take data from a variety of different business sources and then allow us to analyze the business at that level, Jon saying earlier, we're bringing this to intelligence. That's not by chance, right? So here we're doing the same thing. We're pulling data from multiple systems, and one of the advantages is those source systems need to perform. So if we don't keep as long of a data in those source systems because they have to perform. So you naturally have a shorter view, but then you get benefits, as Jon pointed out, with a longer view. But moving it elsewhere and combining it with the data from multiple systems is really where the magic happens. So we leave the source systems with less history so they can perform and do what they're doing in the moment, but we don't lose that longitudinal view of what's going on, and we benefit by combining it from multiple systems. So, I answered that from an architectural perspective. Jon gave us, what it means, on the cusp when you're working a problem, but absolutely the benefit is there from a longer view. And it's not just the long view, it's the long view and the multiple environments or applications, whatever the context of bringing that all into one place. And you can't do that in any individual source system. So there's a real strong benefit there.
Thank you both. And we did get one more question, so I'm going to ask this one as well. Can AAI help with auto-correcting any configuration issue before a workflow kicks off? For example, missing sync objects or variables, or any incorrect syntax in pre-post process tabs. Can we train it as per our business need?
So that's a really great question. AI is not going to interact or make changes at the moment in the workload automation tools in order to resolve that type of dependency issue. But what you will see in AI is you'll see that non-existent dependency, or you'll see that there is something missing or something awry in the business process, and you'll be able to identify it that way. I think that's probably just re-looking at the question again, really. Yeah, I think that's where we stand at the moment with AI.
But certainly that thinking is part of the journey, right? There will whether like today some of the various workload tools will make those choices on their own without looking to a tool like this. But as this journey evolves, you could see where there might be a feedback loop in the future where that awareness could then feed back into the orchestrator itself to make those choices dynamically. We're out on the horizon now, but it's not out of the realm of the possible with where everything is heading. I mean, I know, Jon, you're talking about what exists today, and we should, but I think this is the direction. That kind of question will be answered differently in 18 months than it's answered today. Would you agree with that?
I couldn't agree more. Thanks,
Yeah.
Dan.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dan and Jon, for all your insights. And I wanted to thank our audience for taking time out of your schedule to join us. As mentioned earlier, you will be receiving a follow-up email with resources from today's event, so be sure to check that email out. Thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.